Currently wrapping that Atlantic moisture on into New England, New York, as well as portions of Pennsylvania. You've had some soggy and even some stormy weather at some points. So we see our satellite picture showing where most of the cloud cover is. Underneath those clouds, very wet weather through New York and New England. The forecast for Boston coming up next. We'll have your Florida forecast, so don't go away. And taking a look at the sunshine today, we see a bit of cloud cover here. We've got the tail end of a front draped right across central Florida. Out ahead of it, we've had some moisture, we've had some rain, we've had thunderstorms. Now just a good bit of cloud cover here, while the northern part of the state looking pretty good around Tallahassee. That's on the high end of our suncast spectrum. That means it won't take long at all to burn, so protect your skin if you're going to be the north, though. Stay tuned. Your 5-day forecast is next. From the 40s and even a few, of course, 50s and even a few 40s across the northern tier of states, back to the south, we're still in the 90s in southern Texas and in the southeast, the southwest as well, even a few 100s here. We'll see that same general scenario on Wednesday. By Thursday, a little bit of a computer model is diverging significantly, so a little bit of a question mark on our forecast. We'll try to sort it out for you now. A whopping 4 months as the weather is concerned. What's going on right now, the Northeast still getting wet weather. We've got an area of low pressure here, really two areas of low pressure. One here, a really great low high pressure is built in, and that made for a great day for Atlanta and Birmingham, back towards Jackson and Little Rock. Beautiful conditions, just a typical fall day that you experience in the southeast, and great weather, very, very pleasant indeed as that front pushed on off the coast. Now, south of the front in Florida wasn't so nice. You had some rain, you had some thunderstorms, and now things have quieted down, but you still have a good bit of cloud cover to contend with, but not so. In the minute, 58 in Boston, 64 in New York, 61 in Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. at 68 degrees. So head on northward, things cooling down the rest of the weather for the country. Just will be in the upper 70s to the low 80s from Atlanta to Memphis to Dallas, but we're going to see continued warmth here, and that's going to mean your actual highs on Monday are going to be more like, see, a half an inch of rain or so here through portions of New England, back through the central states where you could see some. Look at what's going on in the tropics, and of course our names for the 96 season started off with Arthur, then Bertha, memorable there, as well as Edouard and Gustav and Hortense and Fran. Our next name on the list, Isidore. And do we have any Isidore? Let's see what it looks like a little closer to home. Our forecast for the Northeast, 60 your low in New York City. Look for a high temperature tomorrow, 69. Windy conditions, maybe even a bit of wet weather here, especially in the morning hours. 58, a low in Atlanta, the eastern Caribbean, moving towards the central Caribbean. And another wave here, almost on the edge of our screen, just moving off the west coast of Africa. Let's first focus in on our wave here in the Caribbean. This is a bit of a flare-up in convection earlier this afternoon, and then that sort of wound down somewhat. And then we've seen a little bit more convection this evening, but again, not a great deal. You can see the convection really dying down on into the evening hours, and it brought some certainly showery weather to the islands, but this is not a climatologically favored area for development. Very rarely, if ever, do we see any sort of tropical storm or hurricane development with a wave at this point in the Caribbean. Unless it comes in as a depression, it's generally not a favored situation for development. We'll continue to watch this one for you to let you know what indeed does happen. Off the west coast of Africa we go, where we have a wave that's moving near 15 north now. You can see it here, moving sort of in a northwesterly direction, and again you can see that the convection has flared up just a bit with this, but it looks like an area of low pressure to the north, and upper low is going to inhibit any development with this. And as I mentioned earlier, we're heading into the end of the Cape Verde season, and it will be very difficult for any of these waves to make it all the way across the Atlantic. We do see a bit of thunderstorm activity again coming off the coast here a little farther to the south, and that's what you need. You need to see the activity farther southward. We'll continue to monitor this. It's been another story in the Northeast. It has been a wet Sunday in New York City. The rain is, but the front associated with all that rough weather has moved on offshore. High pressure building in, and that's kept things very nice today. A beautiful day for Atlanta and Birmingham, back towards Jackson. Very nice conditions. We do have some exceptions in the east, though. One here in the northeast, one low here over the Great Lakes region, another offshore here. producing some very soggy conditions. A lot of rain, some thunderstorms, the wet weather all circulating around that big area of low pressure. You can see here it's generally moving off in a north or northeasterly direction, and the wet weather certainly prevailing here. And it looks like no signs of letting up.
With a complete forecast for you coming up. Stay with us.
And I'm Kristina Abernathy. Autumn officially began this afternoon, and while much of the nation enjoyed a nice day, it's been quite another story in the Northeast. And in the Northeast, though, we've got a couple of areas of low pressure keeping things quite soggy. But again, to the south, high pressure and control, that's keeping things nice and quiet. It was a beautiful day today in Atlanta and Birmingham, back towards Jackson. Not quite as nice in parts of Florida, especially central and southern Florida. The tail end of this front is still draped across the area. South of it, we've had some rain and we've had some thunderstorms, although got a bit of rain into parts of Tennessee and into Virginia, as well as Louisiana, and in the southwest things pretty quiet all in all, although you do see a bit of rain here through parts of Wyoming and into Colorado. Well, let's see what's going on in the southeast first of all, where you do have again some rain here through Tennessee and into Virginia. Back to the south, some wet weather here as well. We'll focus in on a radar of this area, and you can see just sort of scattered precipitation here through parts of Alabama and Mississippi and into Louisiana. But for some other folks in the southern half of the U.S., it could be a bit stormy as we head on into tonight and tomorrow. Temperatures right now, 64 Atlanta, 59 in Birmingham, 48 now in Nashville. So all in all, pretty mild across most of the southeastern U.S. In the west, here we go, where again, you're getting a bit of wet weather for parts of Washington and into extreme northern Oregon. Snow for the Cascades, snow also into Montana and into the Dakotas. On the radar, here's what it looks like. Rainy around Seattle, Portland, Astoria. Can't rule out the possibility of some soggy conditions for you too, as we see that Pacific moisture continuing to stream on in. Temperatures now, again, not so bad in the west either, really fairly mild. Even Seattle at 49 degrees, 62. We continue to get rain and snow here, no big surprises. Here's where things get interesting in the eastern half of the country. We've got the chance for storminess here, plenty of Gulf moisture coming on in, a couple of lows here along our front. To the north, we've got rain, we've got the snow here. Look out the Southern Lakes region on into parts of Minnesota and the Dakotas, and then sandwiched in between is that moisture, the warm moist air overrides the colder air, maybe having some freezing pushing on into Tuesday afternoon along our front and ahead of it to the north around our area of low pressure where the orange is. That's where icy conditions may be a concern, and to the north we've got the snow. As far as precipitation amounts, this is where we think they're going to be most impressive. Snowfall amounts, as Mike showed you here, we are expecting snow through parts of Wisconsin and northern Illinois and on into southern Michigan, where 3 to 6 inches. Thursday, continued warmth here through the central U.S., 70s, 80s, and 90s, and that's going to be the case again on Friday and into Saturday. So look for some unseasonably warm temperatures for much of the country except in the Northeast. We'll have a bit of action here in the eastern U.S., some snow, some strong storms possibly here in the southeast. We'll have to keep a close eye. And into Saturday, it looks like more of the same. We'll stay tuned. Coming up next, we'll take a look at your hometown forecast, so stay with us. Out over the Gulf, rather large area of cloud cover here along the Gulf Coast and on into Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia and points northward. But in Florida, it looks like your highs tomorrow are going to be well into the 70s and 80s. Jacksonville and Panama City, 76 will be your high, 83 for Clearwater and Orlando, as well as for Miami Beach. Now, water temperatures here, again, warming up, 67, Panama City, 64, Daytona, and then southward, your water temperatures into the 70s, into the mid to upper 70s to be exact. Look out tomorrow if you're going to be out in the sun. Make sure you use your sunscreen. The UV index is going to be rather high, especially as we head southward. So Miami, Tampa, use the sunscreen. You're going to need it. Well, that's it for your Florida forecast. Stay tuned. We'll have your 5-day forecast for the rest of the country coming up next. coast and the southern tip of Florida. Let's take a look at a radar out of this area here, and you can see we've got some thunderstorms moving through Owyhee County. And you can see some hail with these, also some very strong and gusty winds, these moving off towards the east, so be on the lookout in that area. So we head back to the maps. Stay tuned for the 5-day outlook coming up next. Eastern Kansas, and we also have the chance for some big storms through this part, at least through parts of Texas and Oklahoma and maybe even Arkansas as we head through time. Right now, just a bit of soggy weather here in Tennessee, as well as back to the south into parts of Louisiana. You've even had a bit of wet weather, but it's here that we're concerned about the threat of big storms here, maybe some severe storms possible in this area. Scattered showers throughout the southeast, but as we head southward again, you can see that wet weather, and although nothing going on here right now, a little later on in our forecast, we think you could have some in Tennessee as well as back to the south. Warm for you across the southeast. We're not seeing much cloud cover, certainly not any rain, just unseasonably warm weather. Again, a few clouds here as we head back toward the lower Mississippi Valley and the southern plains, but for a lot of you it is just very, very quiet and very, very warm. Again, no rain out there, but what we have seen, some very warm weather. As a matter of fact, record-breaking warmth for you already. 89 in Raleigh-Durham now, 87 in Columbia. You're also in the 80s in Jacksonville, Orlando, and Miami. New Orleans, Dallas in the 80s. Atlanta, not in the 80s, but you're at 77 degrees right now. What we're seeing, of course, that chance for thunderstorms, but also another very warm day for a lot of you. But you can see some of the scattered showers and storms moving through New York and into New England. But again, it's been a hot one for you once again around Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Norfolk in the mid-80s to the low 90s. And in New York, you're at 85 degrees right now, so it's certainly been a hot day for you. 85 degrees, again, westerly flow, but with a more easterly flow now. Temperatures are back down around 70 degrees. But for a lot of you, it was warm out there and across eastern New York State from Saranac Lake back down toward Glens Falls and on southward. But we've also seen some storms here around Bridgeport, Connecticut. You've been getting some stormy weather. You can see where the yellows and the reds are. Storms are a possibility, not only here to the north, but to the south, too, into southern Florida. You could see some storms as well. And we are seeing a little bit of wet weather out there, southern Florida, back down toward the Keys. But for you across the south and into the 80s. But as I mentioned, also seeing some rain and storms here, especially south of Lake Okeechobee. So we will be watching for that. We could see half an inch of rain with some of the heavier storms there. That's it for the east. Now, Nick, have a look at the west. These scattered showers and thunderstorms this evening across the northeast, and we will certainly be watching for stormy weather as we're already seeing in parts of northern Illinois. We'll head southward, and we may see more stormy weather here to the south. We're watching this area very closely, and you should too. It could be a very rough night for some of you from the Great Lakes back into the southern plain states. Where will all of this be into tomorrow? Well, we'll continue to watch a soggy time with this front in our area of low pressure, and it's certainly going to be soggy for you in the Great Lakes region. At the end of the south, we may see more storms out there. And notice that we're still seeing wet weather across New England, too, and in the northwest. All that Pacific moisture here, and with that rain for you in western Washington, western Oregon, maybe even a little bit of snow for some of the higher elevations. That continues on into your early evening hours on Tuesday. And again, a real soggy time here and maybe stormy with our front to the south.
Well, there could be some trouble spots out where you're heading this evening.
Stay tuned. We'll detail those areas coming up next on Travel Wise. Don't go away. We could see those winds well over 30 miles per hour from the Great Lakes to the Four Corners region through the Plain States. In the northeast, it's scattered showers for you, scattered showers and a few thunderstorms. Same goes for southern Florida. We've seen a few thunderstorms with some steadier rain in a few areas and maybe even a few areas getting some snow for some of the higher elevations. Stay tuned. We'll have more coming up next on Go Away. Well, it's time now for Weather in Your Health, which is sponsored by Celebrex. And here's what we're seeing if you're allergic to tree pollen. It could be a bit of a problem out there in a few areas, including northern Utah, into eastern Nebraska and northeastern Kansas, And then on into the northeast, we could see that as a problem as well. Some areas there are scattered showers, storms across the northeast. And of course, as we've been saying, we'll be watching along our front here, really from parts of the Great Lakes region in the Midwest and the stormy weather. Rain here to the north, but we could see some storms along this front, so it could be another rough day as we head a little farther east. Our wet weather, well, we're going to see the heaviest amounts of rain in the east. You're also seeing some scattered showers and thunderstorms out there across the Four Corners region, and we're even seeing a little bit of wet weather here into western Oregon as an upper low is helping to bring a bit of wet weather in for you. Not all that impressive on the radar. What's maybe a little more impressive, some of the showers and storms that are firing up here across the southwest. So even though we are getting some rain here, unfortunately to go along with that, we've got the lightning, and that has caused all sorts of problem with the high fire danger here in the west. So not necessarily good news that we're seeing those storms. Temperatures right now, another hot day in the west, 93 Cut Bank and into Salt Lake City, 102 in Las Vegas, 100 in Phoenix. Contrast that with Seattle. You're at 62 degrees right now. Not expecting much wet weather in the west, but in Oregon we could pick up 1/10 of an inch of rain. Some of the heavier amounts will be here in Arizona and New Mexico, where you could pick up 1/2 an inch of rain. And remember, some of that could be in the form of thunderstorms, and in a few instances, some of those storms could be severe. Now with the rest of our forecast, here's Nick. Now back into Ohio and into Indiana, so it's a very active afternoon here across the northeast and back toward the Ohio Valley. A number of severe thunderstorm watches are in effect, including Detroit, Buffalo, Indianapolis, Washington, D.C., and Richmond. And again, it's those strong and damaging winds. We've had numerous reports of trees down, of power lines down as these storms have moved through Ohio and West Virginia. And of course, the heavy rain in Zanesville, Ohio right now, some flash flooding occurring for you. And here are those watches as we put it all into motion. One area we're watching here in Virginia, another into Ohio and Indiana, and more storms here moving out of Michigan, and we'll be watching those into perhaps Pennsylvania and New York as you're under a severe thunderstorm watch as well. Here are the storms, though, as they're approaching Washington, D.C. A line of storms here stretching across much of the state of Virginia. Look out around Fredericksburg, around Richmond, and again, Chesapeake Bay, a special marine warning in effect there. We are also watching, again, just a little closer view here of what's going on into Washington, D.C., and just beginning to see those storms moving in, and also watching the storms here, not so much around Detroit, where most of the activity is off to your east right now, but up towards Saginaw, a particularly nasty-looking storm for you. Some of these storms have been hail producers. We're also watching the storm. That's just a quick update on some of these storms moving through the east. We've just got a new severe thunderstorm warning that does include Washington, D.C., and it does include Alexandria. We'll keep you updated on those storms. Now, we're also seeing some storms here through the Plain States, not so much in the northern plains, but here in Kansas, we have a number of severe thunderstorm warnings in effect. These storms aren't moving much at all, so no doubt getting some heavy rain here. And we are seeing in Stanton and Morton